Good day to all. Today's quote of the day, I'll put it up on the screen here, actually. Fancy. It's from actually a guy named Mel Siff, and I'll talk about Mel here after we read the quote. To me, the sign of a really excellent routine is one that places great demands on the athlete, yet that produces progress over a long-term improvement without injury or soreness to the athlete. Any fool basically any fool can, let me get the quote here. Any fool can create a program that is so demanding that it would virtually kill the toughest Marine or the hardest of elite athletes, but not any fool can create a tough program that produces progress without any unnecessary pain. And that is one of my favorite quotes. And if you hear some noise in the background, that's my dog Rommel chewing on his Kong. So that's just kind of the side effects of me doing a show outside. And it's funny, I go on a coach's call. I've started going on a coach's call with a guy named Bill Hartman, who Bill is an incredibly smart person, and he has shaped my thinking and challenged my thinking and still challenges my thinking on movement and adaptation and fitness. He's been doing that now for a long time. And if you ever check his stuff out, he has a coach's call where he basically gets on a call for an hour and answers questions every Thursday morning at 6 a.m. And if you ever get on one of those calls, just be prepared to feel like you're really stupid for a little while. It's going to take you a while to learn his lingo and his jargon, but he brought up super training and Mel Siff. And if you've been in the strength game for a while, that is a classic. Don't try and read it. You want to use it more like a reference because it's about as exciting as watching paint dry to read it. But it's an incredible reference. And Mel teaches a lot of really good principles, and he was really ahead of his time. He'll teach you the principles. He's not going to write a program out for you, but he'll teach you the way of thinking behind it so you can come up with your own program, which is how I like to teach people and help people learn, is by providing principles and insights. And, Bill did a lot of that for me when I first met him. He was basically like, here's where you're stuck. Here's what you need to do to keep from being more stuck, and just add a few things in and think about it from this perspective. And I was able to take this concept that he taught me and apply it really to everything that I've done for, since about 2010. So, but the concept behind this is really interesting, because we have, in this world of social media, like I could take anyone, I don't care who it is, and I could make them stand with 2 fly swatters and make them hammer their arms up and down as hard as possible for an hour. And they would be exhausted. They'd probably have a ton of neck pain. It would be really hard. They'd be really tired. But what adaptation are you really trying to accomplish? Obviously, if you're trying to get someone to fly, maybe that's a good thing to have people do. But a lot of people don't think about what is the actual adaptation that you're trying to drive with your exercise. Like when I tell people to walk outside 3 times 10 minutes a day, I'm raising aerobic capacity. I'm getting them out in the sun. I'm trying to get their circadian rhythm in order. I'm trying to get them vitamin D. I'm trying to get them to relax. I'm trying to get them to breathe through their nose. There's a specific goal there that's going to have a specific outcome. So what you have to ask yourself when you're looking at an exercise program is, what is the purpose of what I'm doing? And is it going to give me the things I want to do? Because there's a million different exercises out there. There's a million different routines, but are they driving the adaptations that you want? And one, does it suit your body type? Like swimming is probably not a great training modality for me. One, I have terrible rotation through my thorax and my cervical spine from years of powerlifting. So I can't turn my head and swim freestyle. Now, if I'm just swimming leisurely, I have like a snorkel mask that I wear, but that's probably not something that's going to be ideal for me to do as part of a training regimen, right? And so a lot of people will just do activity just for the sake of doing activity. Whereas if you're more targeted with what you're trying to do and what you're trying to develop, like if you're trying to look good and feel good, you walk every day, 3 times a day. You know, you lift weights a couple times a week, and maybe you do a couple short interval sessions a week. And that's going to check the boxes for most people. There's no need to like throttle yourself into the ground or anything like that. You're only, and Joel Jameson talks about this a lot, you're only as good as your body's ability to recover. And if you push beyond your limits on a regular basis, you're just taking away from your body's ability to recover. And that's why a lot of people don't stick with an exercise routine. As they go to a class or something, they get their ass handed to them and they can't walk for 4 days and they never go back. And here's the thing that's really difficult, especially for coaches today. The level of information, because of the internet and because of Instagram, all these advanced things that people are doing and these all these different athletes, crazy stuff that you're seeing, the level of intensity and the training is going here. The population preparedness is going here, right? So when I was growing up, most kids did manual labor. A lot of kids did farm work. They mowed grass. You could take us in the weight room and do lots of stupid things to us, and we were resilient enough. We had the ability to handle it. You take kids today that have mainly played one sport. They haven't really done any manual labor. I'll take kids that are, supposedly great athletes and have them do some really basic calisthenics, and it looks like they die, like they literally like fall apart because they haven't moved in different ways. They haven't done the amount of volume of activity that I did as a child, or a lot of my friends did as a child. But then they'll get exposed to this, very advanced forms of training that, higher level athletes, like somebody looks at like a college basketball program or a professional basketball program and decides they're going to do that with their 11-year-old middle school team, when really all the 11-year-old middle school team needs is some general physical preparedness and some basic understanding of how to apply force in the ground, and they get way better. And a lot of them need aerobic work because they've done so much supervised training that they basically are using this highly adaptive strategy to do things that should be really easy because everything's coached so much. They don't do enough low-level aerobic activity that everything they're doing is very high intensity. So they have to bear down on everything that they do instead of being able to relax and flow. And usually the resting heart rate is a lot higher. So usually when I work with young kids, we work exclusively on building GPP or a base level of fitness so they can handle the more intense stuff. And the other thing people really don't understand is when you first start training, you really don't have to do that much to get better. And just about anything you're going to do is going to get you better. But are the activities you're doing just to make you tired? Or are they giving you the foundation that you need to go to the next level of training and then go to the next level of training? And then realizing that once you reach a certain level, maybe all you want to do is maintain that level, because every level you go up takes a little bit more intensity to get there. And there's costs on the negative side of things. Everybody's always like exercise is positive. It is, don't get me wrong, but there's negatives to depending on what type of adaptations that you're driving, right? So there's consequences to everything. So if you want to be a world-class powerlifter, you're not going to be a world-class mover, right? And so you'll have people in powerlifting that are so stiff, they don't move well, they can walk like crap. And then the other end of the spectrum, you've got people on the bendy side of things that become so bendy, they do so much flexibility work or yoga type stuff, they go crazy overboard on that, and they become too pliable, right? Where they have a hard time getting stability because they've basically done some things to their body that just make them, see people that can bend their elbows backwards and bend their knees completely backwards, and they're too wishy-gushy. And those people that I would call hypermobile are actually a lot more difficult and challenging to train than actually really stiff people, because stiff people are going to have very, very obvious limitations, and they're going to have very obvious compensatory strategies, like things they do to get the movement done that aren't necessarily good in the long run, that have consequences. Whereas the people that are super bendy, it's really harder to identify the compensatory strategy or the strategy that they're using that isn't in a normal range of motion. That's basically how I look at it, right? And so they can cause all sorts of fun things. So with people like that, you're actually focusing on limiting the range of motion into a normal range of motion, right? And it all comes into context, right? Like, who are we working with? I have a different standard for general population people than I do if I'm working with a high level elite Olympic athlete type person that is going to have to accept that there's certain things they're going to have to give up in order to achieve the highest levels of success. But what's the bottom line with this stuff? One, if you're working with an athlete or if you're working with a normal person, let's look for the big rocks first. Let's see the things that they're really, really, really lacking, and they might not have to do, if I have a power lifter that I'm working with, it might be as simple as adding a few things in after they're done to help them shut off and relax so they're not walking around arched all the time. It might be adding a few single leg exercises in. It might be having them round over a glute ham raise or a stability ball and get some air into their upper back so they're not walking around arched all the time. And they spend so much time with their shoulder blades pulled together that they end up having shoulder elbow pain. So it might be something as simple as adding a few things in to give them enough movement variability so they don't start having joint issues. And the other thing with powerlifters too is they might have an inability to get force into the ground and to get air deep into their trunk. For example, one thing Bill helped me with was like getting air and pushing into the back of the belt, because most people would push into the front, which drives them into an arch. Teaching the powerlifter to get, like, especially on the deadlift, to get air all the way down into the canister and pushing that air against the back of the belt, which basically keeps your pelvis from really going into a hard anterior tilt, and it basically creates this circumferential expansion, and you get that pressure deep in your pelvis, which allows you, like on the deadlift, to really, if you have problems struggling with the deadlift, getting weight off the floor, take a breath in, set your rib cage, get set up, take a breath in deep into your core, and create pressure against the back of the belt, deep by your low back. And you'll find, then you load the bar, you'll find when you pull yourself through the floor, it'll come off like a rocket ship. But a lot of guys will lose the ability to get air deep because they're so stuck in this upper chest breathing motion. They can't get air deep down into their trunk and pressure deep down into their trunk. So there's some really simple things I look like if I look at a power lifter. And then, of course, I'm going to look at their sleep, and I'm going to look at, like, hey, are you at least going outside and walking a little bit? Do you have a little bit of an aerobic base? Because we want to make sure, like Louis Simmons was really good about that. He would have his guys drag light sleds on off days to help speed recovery up and to help basically raise fitness so they were in good enough shape to train. With the general population, we don't have to get that detailed, but talking, instead of just bringing somebody in that wants to lose body fat, instead of just bringing them in, throwing them on a treadmill and jacking it up to level 8 and basically running them through this entire circuit, asking questions like, what kind of medications are you on? Do you have a gallbladder? What do you eat? What's your sleep like? And so going after all these low hanging fruit things first, instead of just using intensity. And then understanding if somebody hasn't done anything, isn't in very good shape, just walking 10 minutes 3 times a day is going to make a massive difference for them. It's going to help improve their sleep. It's going to improve all these other things, adding a protein in it every meal. And then starting with circuits, like easy circuits. You're doing carries. Maybe you do a bear crawl hold, where you're holding a bear crawl with the pelvis tucked under. They're reaching through their shoulder blades. They're doing a one-arm carry. Maybe they're doing some squats off a box, doing that in a circuit, seeing how they feel with that. And then maybe, getting them on the floor, teaching them how to get their pelvis and their rib cage in a good position, starting simple like that. And then just building week after week. People always used to, when they come in for the first time with me, I'd run them through a few things and I'm like, that's all I need for today. And they'd be like, that's it. Like, why aren't I sweating? Why aren't I convulsing? A lot of people think that they have to just destroy themselves in order to get results. And many times that takes away from your results. So I've always found that, flirting with maximum exertion, working at about 85% intensity the majority of the time, has much better results over the long haul than putting someone in a beat down. Now, when you have someone that has a great fitness level and they're fairly high level and they have to do some cardiac output work, or they have to work on, which would be like being able to produce power over time, then you get into more, complicated things. But most people don't ever train even that long to do that. And then, if you look at some of these, like I love Peter Attia, I love a lot of these guys like Huberman and all this stuff, but the normal person doesn't have time to do, 4 hours of cardio every week, and they don't have time to do this many hours of zone 2. And they don't have, like, a lot of these guys, if you follow their program, they're not going to have any kind of time for anything else. So a lot of it is like, what's the best result we can get from the least amount of work possible, right? And if a lot of people like training, that's totally fine. But most people, especially if you have a mother that's busy, you can do a lot of things with a general population person with 2 to 3 sessions a week, granted that they're active and walking and, walking outside every day, or maybe they're playing some tennis for leisure, or they're doing some active activity every single day. You can get some incredible results, and there's no need to treat anyone like they're going to buds, right? And that's how you get results and you keep clients for a long period of time, is working within their ability to adapt instead of trying to force adaptation, which usually leads to survival strategies, which usually doesn't end well. So that being said, there's my little rant. There's my little quote from Mel Siff. If you're interested in geeking out on strength training stuff, Mel Siff's book would be a good, he also has, as Bill pointed out this morning, The Facts and Fallacies of Fitness, which I had forgotten about. I have it hidden in my garage somewhere in a box, but I need to pull that out. But he was really ahead of the curve. But the super training one, if you're like a new strength coach, I would just grab it and I would just flip it open to a page randomly during the day. And I would just read a couple pages and look at it. And then the next day, maybe flipping randomly. And but it's also a reference if you have a specific question about, strength, speed, or speed strength, or different types of strength, or different types of conditioning. It's a really good reference where he explains a lot of this stuff in a great way. And actually, it's really funny because that's a lot of the cult kind of following of Mel Siff came a lot from Westside, because Mel Siff spent a lot of time with Louis, because Louis was one of the people that really got into the speed strength and the strength speed and, all that kind of stuff, which makes it kind of interesting. But you could check that out. If you're interested, if you're a dude who's kind of struggling, you don't really know where to start, we're doing a testosterone secrets webinar at the end of the month. Dr. Stillman and I. Dr. Stillman should be back on here tomorrow. He gets back today sometime. And we should be both back on here tomorrow. If not, it'll be me if he can't make it. But yeah, we're doing a testosterone webinar at the end of the month. And there's also a link below where you can find out how we can help you. And if you're a lady who has a dude who's not in a good place, you might just say, hey, these guys are doing something on men's health. Check this link out. And that way they can kind of check it out. And because there's a lot of people that are really struggling today. And I think when people get into a place where they're in a bad place, they just kind of give up. And they're like, man, it's like, I'm so far behind. Like I'm such in a bad place. They just completely give up. And usually what happens is when they go to somebody for help, they usually get overwhelmed with tons of information. And where the key is for somebody who's completely lost and let themselves completely go is give them 1 or 2 things to do and have them do that consistently and get them moving in the right direction and build some new habits. And that's how you build momentum. You do a little bit and then a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And then they level out. And then you kind of figure out where we need to go from here. We go from here to here. And then some people, a lot of people, the one thing you got to understand when you've worked in the fitness industry for a long time, you'll have somebody that you'll work with and you'll start projecting your goals onto the client. You'll have a client come in and you'll be like, well, this client should be able to do this and they should be able to do that and they should be able to do this. And they come to you, you might have like, say, a 55 or 60-year-old lady who's having problems getting up and down out of a chair, or a 70-year-old lady, she wants to play on the floor with her grandkids. And you're training her like she's a power lifter, and that just is not necessary. I mean, you can implement some type of, deadlift and things like that with somebody like that. That would be helpful. Maybe a rack pull or trap bar or kettlebell deadlift, things like that. But if her goal is just to get up and down off the floor and move around, we don't have to train her like she's getting ready for like a powerlifting meet or getting ready for an Ironman triathlon. The stuff that she might have to do might only be a 10 or 15 minute floor warm up every other day and walking outside and a couple, simple exercises that she does that takes 15 or 20 minutes. And that might be all she needs for her to be able to get up and down off the floor and get up and down off the stairs. We don't need to turn her into like, a 7-year-old person that's going to compete in the Senior Olympics. A lot of times, as a coach, you kind of get caught up in this, well, my client can do this and they can do that, which is great. There are going to be clients that want to push themselves that way, but sometimes you have to realize is not everybody's trying to be a performance beast. And some people are just happy being able to walk without pain and being able to get up and down the floor, off the floor without pain. And so you have to use context with who you're working with. And that's another thing too, that Bill talks about a lot is there's some sports, where damage is just part of the game, right? And you just have to mitigate that. You just have to make sure you're not doing more damage. So that being said, I hope you have a great day. And we should see you here again tomorrow. If you have any questions, I might take a minute. Oh, can you gain muscle with circuit work? Yeah, Amy, yes. If you're a beginner, you can gain muscle pretty much doing anything. It depends on who the client is, their training age. And that's the thing too. Like people will do a program of like, this person gained 15 pounds in 3 months. Well, what was their, what have they, what's their training background? If I take somebody who's an elite level bodybuilder and, they've been training for 5 years or, more, if they're elite level bodybuilder, more like 15 years. And I have them start doing circuit work for their main modality, that's not going to end well for them. Unless, of course, it is, we're doing it where they're needing to lose some body fat and leaning out for a show. It depends. It's all context. But can you gain muscle with circuit work? Yes. Especially if you're a beginner. What I like to do is do opposing things. Like when I train people, because people only have 45 minutes to an hour. So we might do some squats and we would pair that with like a dumbbell floor press where they're laying on the ground. Their knees are bent. They're reaching. They're pressing. We're not arching off the floor. So I might do a squat and then go to the dumbbell floor press, which isn't super demanding. It's not using their legs. It's not overly cardiovascular demanding. And I'll do it at if I have someone who needs to get stronger, gain muscle mass. So they squat, they come over, they do their dumbbell press. And then I might have them come over and do, a seated, cable pull down or something like that. And so none of those things are really competing. And we're getting some low to moderate repetition work done on the other two exercises. And maybe the squat is a little heavier. That would be like how I would work. And that also is going to help build work capacity instead of having someone squat and then, they're going to wait for a minute for them to recover. They can go do the dumbbell press, go do the pull down. Now, if I had somebody who was trying to squat 1,000 pounds as a powerlifter, I definitely wouldn't do that. But for general population, I think it's really wise to pair like a squat with a press and then with like a pull down. And then maybe you pair like step ups with, you could pair step ups with, say, an arm bar or a half get up sweep or something like that are opposing. And you would take your time. You wouldn't like rush through it super fast. It's not like you're trying to do like a glycolytic kind of, conditioning circuit. There's a little bit a different application there, but that's a way you can kind of like condense your strength training session down into a shorter period of time, especially if you don't have a lot of time, by pairing things together. And then you could do, say, to finish it off, you do some back extensions or some Romanian deadlifts, making sure that you're stacking your pelvis and your rib cage and your chin is following your rib cage. You could do that with some, leg raises in a dip machine or some dead bugs or something for your trunk. And then you could finish it off with some intervals on a rowing machine or something like that, or on an aerodyne, like a 10-second on, 20-second off. And then do like a quick cool down where you're laying over stability ball, you're hanging in a deep squat off a TRX. That would be a really good full body workout where you're getting a little bit of everything. You're getting a little bit of conditioning with pairing things together, but you're doing some strength work because you're not so tired from the circuits because you're not pushing and you're not trying to go as hard as you can. You're working different opposing movement strategies, and then maybe you can finish it with a little bit of conditioning. A lot of times we would have people, we might even push the prow, like push a sled instead of doing step ups, a heavier sled, because that kind of works the same motion, and that kind of gives you some conditioning as well. So I hope that gives you kind of an idea of how you could structure things if you're like a moderate, beginner to moderate type person. Even advanced, a lot of bodybuilders now are going to, Stan Efferding talks about this, especially as he's gotten older, of pairing things together, doing a press with a row or a press with a pull down, opposing muscle groups. So they're condensing training, especially if you've trained for a long time. You don't really have to do a lot to maintain where you are, right? So a lot of it is like looking at the qualities that you're missing or that you want to add, and then focusing on those while not letting a lot of the other qualities completely go to hell, but understanding, depending on your goals. When you're a beginner, it's really easy. Walk, lift a couple times a week, eat good food, sleep, and you're going to get the results that you want. And then if you want a more specific goal, add more muscle, whatever it is, then you would make the tweaks that you need. But most people just need to be doing a good general strength training program that's balanced. And I think I'll talk about balanced training. Like people will talk about, pairing a press with a row, that's balanced. But here's the problem. If you're doing the press and I don't know if you can see me or not, but if you're doing the press and you're extremely arched, like most people will pin their shoulder blades together and stick their chest out really hard and they'll press, right? And they won't fully lock it out. Okay, so if you're doing that and you're doing the row in the same motion where your shoulder blades are pinned together, right? You're essentially training the same movement pattern. You're not getting a balanced program. But if I'm on the floor or if I'm on a bench and I put my feet on a box and I blow my ribs down and I don't aggressively pull my shoulder blades together, the shoulder blades being pulled together is a strategy that powerlifters and bodybuilders use to lift more weight because it creates a tremendous amount of stability. The problem is it puts the thorax and the shoulder girdle in a really compromised position where you lose your ability to move with a normal range of motion over time. So what I would do is cue people to get their low back down and not arch hard. And actually, when they're doing their dumbbell presses, they're reaching. They're not retracted. They're here. And then I would have them one down and the other one reaches to the ceiling. And then you alternate. So you're getting some shifting and pressure, which is something most people don't do in their training programs because most people's training programs are influenced by powerlifting and bodybuilding. So you're getting that shift. You're not training that hard arch anymore. You're more of a stacked position. And then same thing with the row. I'm not arching and I'm actually reaching this way. So I like doing like opposite single arm rows where I've got a cable in each hand and I'm actually pulling here and I might even turn a little bit and I'm reaching with the other arm. So I'm getting that thorax moving and I'm not arching. I'm actually getting the scapula to move around the rib cage the way it's supposed to. And then I do the other side like that. And then I do this side like that. The way most people are doing it is they're doing the press arched and they're doing the row arched and they're basically strengthening the same pattern of the thorax and the spine. And so they end up basically, and then they do their pull downs like that. Then they do their curls like that. Then they do their tricep extensions with their back arched, and they do their deadlift with their back arched, and they squat with their back arched. And they wonder why they end up having knee pain, back pain, elbow pain, every kind of pain, because all they're doing in their training program is reinforcing the exact same strategy, just moving different limbs with an arched back. And you'll see it. If you come hang out with Dr. Stillman and I, we go to the gym, we'll just look around and be like, arch, 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 arch. Everybody's doing an arch. So you want to do some things where you actually stack the pelvis. And you want to do some things in your program where you're getting a full range of motion, particularly on the reach when you're pressing push-ups. You know, most people will do their push-ups. One, their pelvis will be dumped towards the floor when they're doing it, so they look like they're humping the floor. You'll see these guys doing the military push-ups. Their head's back, their chest is up. You want them to tuck their pelvis. Sometimes I'll put a roller between their knees and have them squeeze it, so everything's in a nice straight line. And then you'll see people do their push-ups, and they'll do the push-up, but they don't move their shoulder blades, right? So it's just basically their shoulder blades are frozen. So you want them to come down, and then when you come up, you want to push those shoulder blades apart. So you get serratus, and that shoulder blade glides around the rib cage, which is stacked, because when you're arched, that shoulder blade doesn't really glide around the rib cage very well, and then the elbow and the other things have to do all sorts of stuff. So I hope that makes sense. And once I get talking, I can't stop. But check out the testosterone webinar if you want to check it out. Please do. And we'll be back on here tomorrow. Amy, thank you for the question. That was really good. I appreciate that. It made me talk a lot, which is good. So have a great day. And for the love of everything French toast, get outside.